Cool. All right, done.
Cool. Hey everybody. For people that don't know me, I'm Dakota. I'm a RIT alumnus and currently a gameplay programmer at an independent game studio called RGD Studios. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about rational game level design, which is really a series of processes developed. But I'll talk about it in a second. So yeah, let's just. So like, what is it? Where does it come from? It's really like a bottoms-up approach to game design. So usually games, you kind of come up with an idea, like a big overall generalization of what the game is going to be, and then you kind of like work your way down. This is like totally the opposite. You take a design concept and then you kind of form a game around it. And also, I forgot to mention, for people that were at the lighting talks, I did like a super quick version of this talk. This one is going to go a little bit more in depth on some of the subjects and give you an opportunity to test what you learned. So this idea, I guess, series of processes comes from Alexis Joly de Sauté. He presented at a talk I attended in a workshop at the Foundation of Digital Games in 2017. I was lucky enough to attend it because of Magic, so that was great. And I don't want to act like this is all my ideas or anything. Full disclaimer, a lot of this is his and his team at Ubisoft's design philosophy that they kind of created, and I incorporate in my work a lot, which is why I want to present it. So he's a pretty accomplished design director, and I works at another independent studio called Lucky Hammers. So when he started that workshop, he said a good game designer can design anything, even a toothbrush. And that's really a line that stuck with me a lot throughout my career in games. Because design in general, forget games, is really just like a meeting of form and function. If you have too much of either one, it kind of falls apart. Though where game design is different is you have this kind of constant balance of like the experience that you're trying to convey. So you see this a lot in walking simulators and things like that, versus like the gameplay you're trying to create, which is usually arcade games and similar things. So kind of how do you find the right balance depending on your game and different things like that? Because like a lot of the time you hear people go, oh, walking simulators are so boring, they have no gameplay. And then on the opposite, like you can see like a lot of arcade games go, yeah, it's fun, but there's no like substance there. It's just like very repetitive, a lot of the same thing. So like you kind of want to balance between both and suit like your needs of the project. And also you kind of get this notion a lot with game design that it's, it's easy to design when you have like no constraints. Like I can do whatever I want, make whatever type of game I want. But in reality, like it's a craft like anything else. And usually by using formal tools, you can kind of strengthen and hone in on your subject, which is why I personally like game jams a lot, because game jams give you a theme and you have your constraints of time and you just go at it with whatever you're trying to do. So like using a process like this helps me a lot because there's formal rules, there's tools, and you can kind of go from there. So like I said about traditional game design, it usually comes down to a process like this. You have some form, like either the company you're working at or something similar, where you have a design mandate, like I become a creative director, and you say, this is the game we're going to make. Let's say it's aliens in space. Okay. What does it play like? What's the experience like? And this is like still in the conceptual phase, right? Like you're still trying to figure out what does any of this mean. What are the means we have to make the game? Do we have 10 years? Do we have a year, 6 months? How skilled is our team? Then from there you can kind of like you've scoped everything out, you know kind of like what your game is, and hopefully you did some prototyping in there maybe. And then ideally you kind of come up with like the dream, which is what everybody's hoping for when they set out to make a game, right? Like it's got that appealing context, it has that production value, whatever level that needs to be if you're indie or AAA, and it has some polish, and hopefully you hope it's fun, right? Like people like it. Rational game design takes, as you can see just from these 5 points here, it's kind of like the rational process, right? You kind of come in and say, I'm going to make this game, I'm going to have this experience, and this is the game we're going to come up with. Rational game design like does the total opposite of that, which is why it's called rational. So the first thing you do is you kind of come up with a table, which I'm going to explain and we'll have to do later in the talk. And then once you have that, you can use that to create prototypes. And what I like about this table is that using this table gives you a pretty solid idea of how fun your prototype is going to be before you've even coded anything, before you've even touched a computer. And after you have your prototypes, you start adding variety, motion, flow, making sure it's hitting a lot of the points that you're looking to get. And then you follow the same type of process using a level design pattern, which is very similar. And then, same hope that you have the dream. I think it gets you a lot closer following things like this, which is why I use it. So there are 7 steps of rational game design. Number 1, you have a goal that kind of comes into play. This is like the first thing you kind of set out or come up with. And it's what I like about this is it's not as specific as like a design mandate, right? So design mandate, like I'm saying, okay, we're gonna make a game about aliens in space. Like that's very specific. You know it's about aliens. You know the setting is in space, and you know that from that you have some needs that need to be met, right? Like as far as what people expect when they hear about a game about aliens in space. But a goal's not like that. Shall I explain? The second thing you come up with is game mechanics. Again, I like this because you have your mechanics before you prototype, so you know exactly the ideology and ideas that are going to come from your prototype, and you're just really testing them to make sure. Then you have your required skills. Now these are required skills of the player, and these are things that you can tweak. Same thing with expected input. I'm going to talk about each of these. Atomic parameters, again, another thing I'm going to talk about. Level design patterns and agreements, and signs of feedback. Okay, so the goal. So a goal in this format is that an objective that the player must complete. And it's important to remember that gameplay is a set of activities, right? Playing hopscotch is a series of activities that you're trying to do to accomplish something. Most games follow this format. I can't really think of too many that don't. At least in some regards. Sometimes a game is just comprised of a series of goals. And I think it's important that a goal is independent of the form. You can't be too specific when you come up with a goal. And really, it should be ambiguous. It should be just enough that the player knows what they need to do, and then you create a game around that, right? Or a mechanic in this case. So coming up with that, you have a set of parameters, you have a thing that you're trying to shoot for, and also, more importantly, the player will know exactly what they need to do from your prototype. So from the example I have here, which is also one I did at the conference, it says get a ball from point A to point B without being intercepted, right? And then you can break this down like just in your sentence structure, right? What's the object? It's the ball. What do I have to do? Traverse the ball. What is failure? It gets intercepted by somebody else. Now, I didn't say anything about what this game is, right? It could be basketball, it could be soccer, it could be some game you made. But ideally, the player knows exactly what they need to do, and you know what you need to make, right? You need to make the means here, which is how does the ball work, what's traversal like, and how does it get intercepted? These are all things the player also needs to know that aren't provided by your goal. So, game mechanic, which is the next step. And I actually love this definition. I use it all the time because game mechanics, a lot of times when players and developers talk about them, they're very ambiguous. You don't really exactly know what entails a game mechanic. You have an idea of it's something that you do in a game, but it's never like specific enough that I can understand, like just from the sentence what they're talking about. For example, you might say like, I had a friend the other day say like, oh, it's such a weird mechanic that you can nuke people in Fallout 76. Like, maybe that's a mechanic. I probably wouldn't consider it myself. But, like, the idea of I know it's what he's kind of getting at, which brings me to the next point, is that if there's no challenge, it's just an action. It's something you can do in the game. That's not always a bad thing. But you need to know that a game mechanic is a challenge, right? It can be easy, it can be hard, there can be no challenge at all. Which is, if that's the case, it's borderline in action. And you can use this to kind of gauge further down the pipeline, like make sure that actions you take are fun as well, right? Like one of the examples you brought up was from a game that had a menu system, and the menu system didn't pause the game. It was single player, so when you brought up your menu, like you could still be attacked. Fallout 76 did something similar, and that makes it a challenge, right? So now it's a challenge. You have to go through and scroll through your menu, find what you're looking for, and get out before you get attacked. That's way different than just like you opening a menu, pausing the game, and then you figure out what you're doing. Because now there's a time challenge to it, right? So it's important to identify what are challenges, what are actions, and how you can use that to make the game better. So again, all challenges can really be broken down into 3 categories: physical, mental, and social. And that's important because you can figure out what you're challenging, right? When you kind of finally have your mechanic, you know, okay, this is a physical mechanic, this is a mental mechanic, this is a social mechanic. And I think that's important because a lot of games focus on physical mechanics. If you can clearly identify, like you can say, okay, that's a physical mechanic. If I need to, move my finger, I need to press a button, it's a physical mechanic. You have to think, different stuff. So again, kind of coming back to the design point, when you're designing mechanics, you need to think about what is the experience I'm trying to convey. Now, this kind of borderlines on the experience of the game, but it's also the gameplay experience, which is different, right? Because they're not always the same. Like what you experience in, say, Gone Home as the narrative experience is way different than the gameplay experience, right? So you need to kind of keep that in mind as you're going about your designs. And then what I like as programmer, gameplay programmer, designers need to be able to provide a clear proof of intention to the rest of the team. You can't just hand me a design and say, this is how it's going to work. I didn't really think it through. This is, you make it happen. I'm probably going to come back and ask a ton of questions. That's what I do daily with our designers if they have different needs and stuff. So if you're a designer, it helps out a lot to provide, a clear indication of exactly what you need for everybody, for programmers, artists, sound people. So after you have that, you figured out like what your mechanic is, you're going to come up with a set of required skills. What are you asking the player to do, right? What do you want them to accomplish or fail at? Like, what are the stakes, right? Yeah, so this kind of comes down to the nature of your challenge. You need to have an idea of what you're challenging. Are you challenging their IQ? Maybe you have a trivia game, right? Totally different than something that's just challenging your Twitch skills. How fast can you press a button? How quickly can you move from different points? How fast can you traverse? Those are all different things. So physical skills usually seem to be pretty easy, right? You can say like, okay, I just have to press this button, it lets me jump, and I can move from point A to over here when I move the analog stick in the room. Mental skills are a lot tougher. So this is like some of the stuff that builds on just that simple jumping. You could say like timing, reflexes, measuring, how fast can I jump, different things like that. And then social skills are super hard. So something like empathy. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even really know where to begin with something like that. Hopefully, if you follow this format, you might come up with an empathetic game mechanic. So expected input. Like now, this is a lot different than required skills, right? Because before you're kind of asking them at a higher level, like conceptually, what are they doing? This one is physically, like what are they literally doing? And a lot of people sidestep this step, I think, in design. They kind of come up with this great idea of a mechanic, and then like the way you execute it feels totally off. I think that following this process, you can find a way to make sure that what you're actually physically doing is fun. And I think you can get that, right? If you've been playing games a while, you know that pressing buttons in certain ways can be fun. Or you can just hold a controller or a phone or whatever you're building for. And I imagine, like, would this be fun? Like, would it be repetitive? Would it be boring? I think like a really good example of this is like web swinging and Spider-Man, right? The new Spider-Man. Because in that, like they clearly have all of the steps that you're looking for, right? You know that you need to press a button in order to throw a web, which is going to launch onto a building. And if you press it at the right time, you're going to get the momentum and keep going. And it's pretty seamless, all of the steps that you go through. Like just pressing that button at that right time feels great. And it almost wouldn't matter what's on the screen, right? You know that like that timing and that dopamine hit you get as soon as you press the button feels good. And yeah, like bad input is the total opposite, right? Like if how many times you've been playing a game and you like the game, but like the way you play it is just kind of terrible. It's happened to me a lot. And then like a lot of players just won't even go further than that. They go, well, this isn't really that fun. I'm gonna go play something else. So then this is kind of where we have a new set of tools that this RGD offers you, which is atomic parameters. So an atomic parameter is like the factor of difficulty that you're adding to your mechanic, right? So this is like saying if you have a game mechanic, you can have individual values. Like if you're a programmer, a way to think about it is like if you're in Unity, like what are the values you're going to pass to your designer? Like that you would say, okay, built the mechanic out that you requested, and here's all the parameters that you can tweak. So now they can get some instant feedback when they're designing and try to see that it's fun. And you're doing this before the prototype stage, right? So you have that ahead of time before you even code anything. And then you need to ask yourself, like, can I use this to make this mechanic more or less fun? If you can't, then you should probably just ditch it. There's really no point in having it. And again, you need a metric, right? Like, this should be a sliding scale of some kind that you're tweaking, and that will make the game, make this mechanic specifically harder or simpler. So you create a parameter table, which I'm going to show you how to do, that is going to quantify each of these different parameters with a metric that you can kind of grade against to see how hard or how easy different things are. So again, stop adding parameters when they have no impact. And according to Alexi, even some of the biggest games, more than 6 parameters is typically useless. So when he was working on Assassin's Creed, he said that they had like 5. So per mechanic, they would never have more than 6. And you probably wouldn't need that. At that point, you're probably looking at something bigger, which is more of a bigger, more involved system design, and not something that's specific as a mechanic. And again, be confident in like what you kind of come up with your parameters and your mechanics in general. Because at the end of the day, following this process, you're not going to know until it's a prototype, right? And then that's when you do the evaluation of, okay, this is fun or this is not fun, and I should do something else. So level design, patterns, and ingredients. Again, this is pretty much the same thing we just went through for the RLD table. You can do the exact same thing for level design, right? Like, what is the expected input? What mechanics can I use to traverse a level or get through? And what are the experiences that like I'm trying to put the player through? What am I trying to convey in my game? So Luke McMillan wrote about level design using RLD, and he said, mathematically speaking, linear increases in complexity have exponential increases in game difficulty. So if you think about it like that, from a math perspective, as you increase all of your complexity of all of your mechanics or your designs, the game is getting way harder. So that's something you should think about when you're designing levels, and especially because if a level's not easy to traverse, you know that you're adding too much. And simple level design is usually the best. You can look at a lot of different famous AAA examples of like that have the best level design. They're usually some of the simplest levels you can think of. They just are using really clever points of impact to really make the level stand out. And again, like when numbers fail, which is true this whole talk, then you look at to chaos, right? How do you make things better? How do you make game levels better? Adding chaos randomness usually is a good thing. So signs of feedback, Ro gave a talk about this, about how you provide a feedback loop for all of your players to know when they're succeeding or failing at the mechanic or the parts of your goal that you've set out for them. And they don't really need hand-holding, but they do need like different steps of clarity to know, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I know exactly how I'm failing, or I know how I'm succeeding. So this happens a lot in a lot of different games. I see it all the time where I don't really know why I'm losing, and then I really don't want to keep playing. But if I know why I'm losing, I go, oh, I just need to get better, or that was a stupid mistake I made, and it's on me. So you really want to kind of communicate that to your players so that they understand why, right? You don't want to ever hide your failure or their success behind a black box. So yeah, reward systems are a good way to do this, and also systems that present clear and defined failure. Teach desired and undesired behavior, and they won't feel bad if they know that they're the ones that messed it up. Okay, so a quick example of the first 1 through 5 steps. So with this goal, I get a ball from point A to point B without being intercepted. The required skills are precision, timing, and measurement. Expected input. So what am I physically playing at? For this example, I'm going to say it's a mobile swipe, so let's say it's a mobile game. And what does that kind of like entail? Like, how would I move this? I'm going to say that there's going to be an origin point and an end point, speed, distance. This is all kind of stuff I think about as a programmer when it comes to like moving a ball, right? But the actual atomic parameters are many of those. It's the window of opportunity, right? How long do I have to swipe this ball and get it to move? How long am I waiting in my anticipation? For my window of opportunity, and then angle of tolerance, like what's the angle I'm trying to move this ball at? Am I trying to like, kick it off the wall or something? Amplitude, how hard am I hitting it? How fast am I swiping? And then the difficulties, I use these pretty much for every RLD table I make: none, easy, medium, hard, and possible. I think none and impossible are important because you need to know, okay, what if it's just an action, or what if it's just unbeatable, right? So here's a table, actually, of that example. So you have your parameters on the left: window of opportunity, anticipation, angle tolerance, amplitude tolerance, and then the difficulty: none, easy, medium, hard, impossible. So for this, I can clearly see like what would make this mechanic hard or easy, right? If I had less than 10 seconds to hit the ball, or wait until my window of opportunity, might be pretty difficult. If my window of opportunity is very small, I only have a set second to flick my hand, that's pretty hard too, versus like 10 seconds. Angle tolerance, again, pretty stark difference. -5 degrees I have to hit within my window versus 360, which is just I flick it anyway, it doesn't really matter. How hard, again, same thing. But like from this, you could easily like make a prototype, right? You could see, okay, I just need to add these things in, and whatever the game we decide on is, we can mix around that to make sure that it lines up with these. And then the designer can come in and tweak these, right? Like you could say, okay, I'm gonna make the window of opportunity 2 seconds, or I'm gonna make it 10, right? And they can just slide and scale that anywhere in between. So from here, I'd like to do like a 15-minute group exercise where we all kind of form teams of like 4 or less. And then I'm going to give you guys a random goal, and hopefully you can follow like the first 5 steps to come up with a game mechanic and a table. So you can pick like whatever you'd like for expected input, which would be like, what are you playing on? Could be analog, could be, board game or card game, could be nothing, could be a video game. And then, like a bonus, I would like you guys to like come up with the form of the game last. So, try to design a mechanic, right? And then but not like the game that goes with it, if that makes any sense. So you're kind of coming up with a set of rules and parameters, but you're not going through and figuring out exactly what that looks like until the end. And then ideally, explain a little bit about your design intent and explain your table if you could, or parameters. And I have Sam's got some copies of the presentation up here. If any of that like was too much, or you need a reminder, and pens and paper up here too. Cool. So can we break off on the teams? Let me know when you guys get your teams, and I'll hand out the goals too. Yeah. Cool. Paper.
So you're not assigning rank.
Yeah. I got it on the game. So cool. So has everybody got a team? Looks like it. So I've got like some random goals here. So this team, you guys are gonna. Your goal is to prevent the opponent from scoring. It can be whatever you guys want from that. This team never have too much or too little of any resource. You guys in the back there, match the objectives. However you want to treat that. And the 4th one is going to be stay on the path until reaching the end. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll help you guys out.
Sports anymore. Fortunate. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to each one is basically moving around Mario. One person has Mario. Feel free to chime in. We want to be more explicit. The first thing that came out of my mouth. But he has
Can each group raise their hand if you still need more time? Anybody need more time? Like 10-minute warning.
I think like 8:15. Bring it back.
That's what I was thinking.
Cool.
All right, everybody, I think we're gonna bring it back and wrap up your design real quick. Cool. So, hope you guys found that enjoyable. I'd like to kind of bring everybody, or at least one person from each group, up to the front to kind of share like what your design intent was and your goal and kind of the mechanic you came up with, any parameters, and then just like overall how you felt about designing this way. If it was helpful at all, or anything else you might have. So let's start with this group up here.
So the goal we were given was prevent the opponent from scoring, which could be just about anything. And so the mechanic we chose was target and scope sights. So the person preventing the opponent from scoring is the person who's the target. And there's a scope sight trying to shoot them. Skills are prediction, dexterity, and precision. And then the input that we chose was just a thumbstick and a button. So thumbstick, well actually it's just thumbstick, just to move around. And the atomic parameters were time until countdown, so like the opponent would at some point initiate a countdown like until the time ran out. Speed of movement, both scope and target. Inertia of movement, so if you like can't change direction instantly. Precision, which is the precision of the target, like how big the target is, how close it has to hit you, and the number of obstacles on the screen. And then we made a table of those things, realized that like we didn't really have any clear idea of what the numbers should be, so we just picked numbers.
Yeah.
So I assumed we just kind of plug them in and then be like, this doesn't work, and change it. And I thought it was really useful, and what was interesting about it was that we could look at this and say that this would be really boring. We immediately would want to start thinking about other mechanics that would, but it seemed like it would ground us in a way of coming up with other mechanics and knowing pretty quickly whether they'd be interesting or not.
Yeah. So, awesome. Cool. Round of applause. So I love that. I'm glad that was interesting that you guys got that result of like, this wouldn't be fun at all. So that's pretty good. I'm glad that you guys got that. Let's do the next group. You guys want to say something up?
I couldn't remember exactly what the wording was on the slide, but it was like the goal was never have too much or too little of a resource, I think.
Yeah.
So we went for like trying to balance a balancing act, I guess, where you have like a joystick as the input, and you just like increase it or decrease it, and then atomic parameters around that would be the sensitivity of like how much it increases or decreases when you push the lever, maybe a little bit of delay that increases, external forces that could affect the amount you have, I guess. So if we're thinking about like a lever and like a meter, I guess, and things like leaking out of the meter, and then the window in which the window of that meter and like how big or how small would be like an optimal range and how far away from that optimal range you could get. Yeah, I think we found a lot of context for this mechanic, which is really cool, of just like coming up with ideas of how this mechanic could be applied to different styles of games and different games. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Let's do group 3 back there on the left.
Alright, so our challenge was to stay on the path until the end. So
we thought of sort of like a simple runner game where like you run with a path with gaps in it, and then you tap on the screen to jump over the gaps, and you get coins that are on the path. Yay! So the I can't remember the terms for the skills, but the skills we chose were timing and reflexes. And then the what is it, Adam's atomic parameters were the size of the obstacle, the speed the player moves at along the path, the distance the player can jump, and then sort of the coyote frames is what I've heard it referred to. But in platformers, basically when the player runs off the edge, those extra few frames where they can still jump to give the player an extra chance to go. And then we sort of parsed that all out. We had a little difficulty because we realized that all of these are sort of very interlinked variables, so we ended up trying to like write them as expressions relating to each other and all that. But in the end, I think this would work out. It's pretty similar to a game that was played before, so we might have cheated a little bit. Anything else I'm supposed to describe here?
Do you think the game would be fun?
Yes, I think this would work. Also, the coins act as a way to reward the player for their time spent because they can collect them throughout different lives.
Okay. Awesome.
When you were saying that the parameters all related to each other, is the idea of an atomic parameter that it doesn't relate to anything else?
It only needs to relate to the game mechanic. So it's okay if they kind of overlap. Like amplitude of tolerance is similar to like angle of tolerance in my example. So like those could kind of overlap. It'd be okay. But the more independent you can keep them, the easier it is to tweak because you can see more visible difference as you check the mechanic. Cool. And then last but not least, last group in the back.
Howdy. So our goal was to match the objective. So kind of looking at that obvious failure, you do not match what's given to you. The goal condition was you have to match at least two things. So we took that, and memory is like the key skill and the mechanic in there, but then we decided to add in a social aspect of, hey, match faces to name. So I'm horrible at that. So this game is horrifying me. So kind of with that, the skills ended up being memory, a little bit of reading comprehension based on how difficult the names are or how much you don't know certain languages, and then facial recognition. Input, obviously, just kind of like we decided that doing this is probably like on Facebook or on your phone, so just click, see if it matches, wait for the feedback. For the parameters we ended up going with, it was time limit if you want to add in how quickly you have to do it, the level of detail of the photo you're given. So is it a full body shot, just waist up, the head, a single pixel of the entire image? That's how it works.
Yeah, it's good.
The number of matches, so how I guess like varying it is in what you're looking at. Oh wait, sorry, I got those two mixed up. Number of matches is just like how many things you have to match at once, and then the match pool would be if you're using this for, say, like on Facebook, seeing like, oh, is this your close friends that you have to match names for, or are you looking for people from high school, that third cousin you just can't remember their name. And then for the feedback, after you click two things, if you get it correct, they either need to play in some way, probably check marks on them so that they stay so you can remember that. Sound, lots of screaming if you get it wrong. And then you want to kind of check those X's. Nice. Did I miss anything, guys?
What do you think it'd be fun?
I think it would be hilarious to play this game in a room full of people that you should remember. Or, you know, play it before GDC so you remember people's names before you meet them.
I think it's awesome. Good job, guys. Cool. Well, that was great. You guys came up with some awesome designs. I like that one a lot because you guys took on the social mechanic, which is like super hard. So that was a good one because these people could be offended if you don't know their name. So I'm just gonna go through my closing thoughts on this. Rational game and level design are super great processes that I like, but they're also very difficult to master. Like when I did this workshop at FDG, he hated our designs. He thought they were terrible. But he said that at the end of the day, it comes down to just practicing and making sure that your parameters are good in practice as well as conceptually. So you only get that with experience. And then here's my hot take, is that like maybe fun in itself isn't all that subjective. A lot of people say, oh, that's fun to me, but like it might not be fun to you. I don't agree with that. Mostly because large and small game companies consistently put out fun games, right? Like look at Nintendo and Blizzard, like they're always gonna have like good games that are borderline like objectively fun. But I think that whether they're using something like this or not, they probably have a set of systems in place to ensure that design meets expected criteria. So I think that following formalized game design processes helps out a lot, at least with me, going through concrete steps like this, similar to math. However, like the caveat is that at the end of the day, game design is an art form, and art is always going to be subjective. But at least ideally, maybe when you're working on your games, you can kind of come up with something that's going to reach a larger audience where a lot of people could just look at it and go, or play it and go, that looks fun. Like I would like to play that. And then the biggest takeaway that I always have from this process is that even if I'm not following each of the steps or making a table every time I design a game, what I like about this process is it always asks every step, like, am I having fun right now? Like, would this be fun? And I find myself doing this a lot like when I'm playing games, like whether I'm moving through like a menu or just like going through a core mechanic or whatever I'm doing, I'm always asking myself, like, am I having fun like right this second? Not like, did I have fun 30 seconds ago or a minute, 5 minutes? Am I having fun right now? Which is why I like this, because you can see from the tables, like kind of like what you guys in the first group said, that this wasn't fun, like maybe this wouldn't be fun right now. And then so I can take any questions anybody has, and then there's some further reading, rational design, core agreement, origins, how they made that, Ubisoft, and then intro rational design handbook, intro RLD, from Kevin McMillan. So if you guys want to look those ones up. And I think we're gonna post the slides too, right? Yeah. Cool. So does anybody have any more questions? Anything outstanding? Awesome. Thank you guys.
All right, everybody, thanks for coming. Take some pizza if you want. Meet up next Wednesday. $60.